Well, hello, minders. Welcome back to the Mind Watercolor. It's really great to be getting back to doing some actual painting again. We are going to paint this bridge right here in Pennsylvania for Family Matters, briefly for the weekend. And I was hoping to do a little bit of plein air, but the weather was just a little chilly. This is the bridge. It's in a small town called Lewistown. And it was built in 1813. Pretty cool. I love historical subjects. We're going to talk a little bit about the photography and things that I look for when I'm trying to bring home a photo when I can't do the plein air. And, that is always a great possibility. So we'll get to that in a minute. So today I am painting in my brand new Hanamula 100% cotton sketchbook. And these are due to hit the market in the US before very long. I think they're already or have already been available in Europe and Germany. And it's great. I did a bird video. If you haven't seen that, I hope you'll go check it out. And we're going to work on that today. So I did want to just briefly thank everyone for their well wishes and condolences, with the family tragedies and stuff that have happened. Thank you. The outpouring of care and prayers and thoughts was just amazing. And I just wanted one more time to thank everybody. But life goes on, and we are going to paint this scene. Now, instead of sketching in with a pencil, I'm going to use this Derwent water brush, and this is the fine point Derwent. I like this for sketching. It works for me. It's a process that I've been working on. I have a video on how that process is done. I'll put it down in the description. But I use this fine point Derwent water brush, just like a pencil, to sketch in. And I usually use like fairly pale palette dirt, just residue that's on the palette. It's a more forgiving process of sketching than it looks, but it blends nicely with the painting, and I like using it. Again, keeping, the sketches and the lines very, very faint and very pale. And I do sketch linearly with it. I don't do a lot of shading, just a little bit. The color comes later. So we're just going to go through and block this in very basic shapes, just to give me a guide about where to paint. I did want to talk a little bit about the photography. If you're going to an area and you're unable, maybe you plan to do plein air, but you're unable to do it, by all means, get the shot. Get the shot for sure. That was the case here. And what I look for when I am photographing a scene that I want to paint, is I am looking at it through artist's eyes, and it's a little different than through tourist eyes. Sure, if you want to take a picture that's going to capture the scene and something you'll remember, by all means do that. But if you're going to paint it, I would think just a little bit further. In this case, I was looking at it, I was trying to look at it the same way as I look at any scene that I might watercolor, and that is with dynamics. So I walked all the way around this bridge, both banks, looking not only for the most scenic angle. Here we're just going to start laying in some color. Just a pale sky. It was a little bit bluer than this. And there was like one cloud off to the right. So I wanted to make it a little more interesting. So yeah, just a rough approximation of skies with a few suggested clouds here. Mostly ultramarine blue and some neutral tint. There's the scene. You can see the sky. A little odd the way that sky was shaped, or the clouds. But getting back to the photo, I look at the photos that I might paint from the same way I will look at the final painting, and that is, where are my bold value shapes? Where are the shapes of contrast that are really going to make this pop? And that's where I compose the scene, not just for a nice framing of the picture and framing of the bridge, but also really thinking, if I were painting this part or painting that part, would this give me a good, clear reference, good, clear ideas of how to add values that really stand out, really accentuate the scene. So I'm just throwing in my background, the tree line that follows along the bank behind the bridge. And I want as much variegation as possible. And I was trying to keep these colors pretty wintry. I mean, we're just getting into spring. Pennsylvania wasn't as far along as our spring in South Carolina. So there's some green, but there's also a lot of gray and sort of mauve grays in the trees and the limbs. But I wanted to keep it interesting, keep it variegated, so that's what you're seeing. And just trying to keep it fresh, put in some of those dancy little foliage edges. Now, I didn't get all of this foreground on video, but the strokes were pretty simple. Again, the photo, it had no interest really in the foreground. It was just like a solid green lawn, basically. So I knew I wasn't going to paint that. But it gave me a fairly, there you can see it, gave me a fairly good value base to study. So I just wanted to stroke in some variability. Azo Green, a touch of neutral tint, very little touch of Phthalo Green. Now I'm just cleaning up some of those dark details behind the bridge. You know, and a great photo where you consider the values in your photo as carefully as you do a painting itself just helps so much when you get to the painting stage. There's going to be a fairly precarious managing of the value of the water versus the value of the lawn in front. So I knew the water, at least in the scene, was darker than the grassy foreground. So I'm trying to accomplish that, but I don't want to make it too dark. It'll just look like a road or something. Now the bridge itself is the lightest value in the scene. So I'm trying pretty hard to match the photo on that. And this is, again, important. I have said it many times, and it is something especially the beginner needs to pay attention to, is values are more important than color. Beginners tend to obsess over color. What color is that? What color do I need to do that? How do I mix that color? Well, you can get close and probably mix these colors in a dozen different ways, but what's more important is the value, how light or how dark it is. So I wanted to put in the lightest values on that bridge, just give it some warm color, very pale washes of Indian yellow and red iron oxide. It's so pale, mostly just water. But now under the arch, we're painting the darkest value in the scene. And I really felt like when I took this photo, this was going to make or break this painting. The value of that arch, which is, again, by far the darkest value in the scene, versus the lightest, which is the bridge above it. And then how the values kind of work in concert around those things. You spend a lot of time composing your scene when you take the photo and thinking through the values. And it might be perhaps where you're in a city or a town, an area where you could come back and photograph it at a different time of day and get a much better combination of values. Right now, I'm just lifting some of the pigment in the water to kind of hint at the reflections that bridge was casting. They weren't very mirrored reflections. They were mostly just faint. A little bit of foliage on that far bank. And here's another contrast area that I was targeting. I'm simplifying this over the photo, of course, as is usually a good idea, but I wanted to frame that bridge with some nice contrast. And the way the scene naturally appeared with some nice dark woodsy tree lines behind the bridge and that dark arch under it just gave for a really nice framing of values. And now you can see what I'm doing with the bridge itself. I'm going through, and this is going to lower the value a little yet, which is why I painted it so light to begin with. I'm adding in some suggested stone texture. And this needs to be very suggestive, this kind of work. You go in and paint very distinct, strongly rendered stones, it's not going to look real. You just want a slightly discernible texture that is reminiscent of the stone texture. And now we're going to go back to those tree indications I sketched in and put them in for good, for real. Combinations of red iron oxide, neutral tint, a little bit of Dioxizine Purple, all mixed to a nice neutral, dark but warm neutral. And this is greatly simplified from the reference. The photo was very chaotic. So, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to be doing a lot of that. Just leaving out a lot of detail. Combining values to give you a little bit more simplified areas. Or I should say, combining areas that have the same value. These trees, by and large, were bare. There were some evergreens over to the left, which I'm indicating branches. But there was starting to become some growth on the trees, so I'll kind of dry brush that in later. But we're pretty much in the detail phase now. And the values have created what I needed to see on this painting. The impact I want. At this point, I'm not changing any values now, I'm just adding details. This is another point that you really need to understand in these scenes. Just a little close-up of me adding some gouache. I put those trees in dark and then added a white highlights with gouache. There's a warm white. We're getting down to the final details. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a good representation of the day, the values, the light. And I think it's worthy of a sketchbook, and I'm pleased. But get that photo and think about that photo in regards to your painting. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.